I spent my life putting bad guys behind bars, but one sun-drenched Saturday, the law itself became my captor. The sun was warm on my face, the kind of perfect Saturday afternoon that makes you feel like you've got the world on a string. I was loading the last of the groceries into the trunk of my Audi, organic milk, a bag of those dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets for my daughter Lily, and a nice bottle of Cabernet Sarah and I had been wanting to try. It was the picture of suburban bliss, the quiet reward for a long week of putting bad guys behind bars. That's my job. I'm a prosecutor for the county. I spend my days in a courtroom upholding the law. I never imagined that the law, or at least a twisted version of it, was about to come for me in a grocery store parking lot. It rolled up without its sirens, a predator gliding through a field of minivans and shopping carts. A city police cruiser, windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. It stopped directly behind my car, boxing me in. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were running a plate, a routine check. I closed my trunk and gave a short, polite nod in their direction. That was my first mistake, acknowledging them. The passenger door opened and a cop got out. He was thick, with a shaved head, and a swagger that screamed he'd been on the force too long and seen too little real action. His name tag read Miller. He didn't walk towards me so much as he stalked, his hand resting casually on the butt of his sidearm. "Got a minute, buddy?" he asked, his voice laced with a condescending drawl. I kept my hands visible, resting them on the trunk of my car. I know the drill. I've prepped countless witnesses on how to interact with law enforcement. Stay calm, be respectful, don't make any sudden moves. "Of course, officer. Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice even. "We'll see," he grunted, his eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan of me. He looked at my watch, my pressed polo shirt, my leather shoes, and then lingered on my car. It was the kind of look I knew all too well, the look that says, "How did you get all this?" "We had a report of a vehicle matching this description involved in a B&E over on Elm Street," he said. It was a lie, and we both knew it. My car was a late-model German sedan. The B&E suspect vehicle, according to the bulletin I'd read myself that morning, was a 10-year-old beat-up domestic pickup truck. "I see," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, I've just been in this fine establishment for the past hour, as my receipt can attest." I started to reach for my back pocket. "Whoa, whoa, slow down there," Miller barked, his hand now gripping his weapon. "Let's see some ID. Slowly." I complied, pulling my wallet out with my thumb and forefinger and handing him my driver's license. His partner, a younger, nervous-looking kid named Davis, had gotten out and was now standing a few feet away, watching. Miller took my ID, glanced at it, then back at me. A smirk played on his lips. "Marcus Thorne, you live over in the Bluffs?" The Bluffs was the wealthiest neighborhood in the city. It was also about 98% white. "That's right," I said. "Must be doing all right for yourself, Marcus," he said, drawing my name out like it was a joke. He handed my ID to Davis. "Run him." As Davis walked back to the cruiser, Miller leaned against my car, crossing his arms. He was trying to intimidate me, to get a rise out of me. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I stood there, silent, as the Saturday shoppers walked by, some stealing curious glances, others pointedly looking away, not wanting to get involved. I could feel the heat of 100 invisible judgments on my skin. Davis came back, handing the ID to Miller. "He's clean, sir. No wants, no warrants." I expected this to be the end of it. A simple case of mistaken identity, they'd say, before getting in their car and driving away, leaving me to salvage what was left of my Saturday. But Miller didn't even look at his partner. His eyes were locked on me, and they were filled with a venomous disappointment. He'd been hoping for a different result. "You seem awful calm for a guy being questioned about a felony," Miller said, stepping closer. "A little too calm, a little too slick." My prosecutor brain was screaming. He had no probable cause. This was a fishing expedition, a blatant violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. But the man who just wants to get home to his family brain knew arguing constitutional law with this guy was a losing game. "I have no reason not to be calm, officer," I said. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's what they all say," he sneered. "You know what? I'm getting a real suspicious vibe from you. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back." The world slowed down. "Officer," I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing its polite edge. "On what grounds?" That was the challenge he was waiting for. "On the grounds that I said so," he roared, shoving me hard against the trunk of my own car. The metal dug into my hip. Before I could even process it, he had my arm twisted behind my back in a way that sent a shockwave of pain up to my shoulder. My face was pressed against the cool glass of the rear windshield. I could see the reflection of the spilled groceries. The milk carton had burst, a white splash across the black asphalt. The bottle of Cabernet had shattered, mixing with the milk in a sickening purple-pink puddle, and scattered all around were the little dinosaur chicken nuggets. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into my wrists. Davis, the younger cop, just stood there, his mouth slightly agape, a deer in the headlights of his partner's rage. Miller yanked me upright and spun me around. "Marcus Thorne," he said, his face inches from mine, his breath sour. "You are under arrest for resisting an officer and obstruction of justice." He shoved me toward the back of his cruiser. As he pushed my head down to get me in the car, I heard him mutter to his partner, his voice dripping with triumph. "Told you these guys always have something to hide." Sitting in the sweltering back seat, the cage pressing against my knees, I watched my perfectly normal Saturday disappear in the rearview mirror. Miller got in, started the car, and picked up the radio mic. He cleared his throat, his voice suddenly becoming a formal, official monotone. "Dispatch, 7 Adam 12. Show me with one in custody. Suspect in the Elm Street B&E. He resisted, but I've got the situation under control." He clicked the mic off, and then, with a cruel smile in the rearview mirror, just for me, he clicked it back on. "Yeah, we got him. Another one who thought his fancy car made him above the law. Let's see how tough he is downtown." The ride downtown was a masterclass in performative policing. Miller drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a self-satisfied rhythm against the divider. He kept catching my eye in the rearview mirror, a smug, predatory grin plastered on his face. He was enjoying this. He wasn't just doing his job. He was indulging a deep-seated prejudice, and my Audi and my zip code had given him the perfect excuse. I remained silent. Every word I said could be twisted. Every protest would be labeled as aggression. I was no longer a man. I was a suspect, a narrative he was actively writing. My mind, however, was a whirlwind. I was dissecting the encounter, filing away every unconstitutional detail. The lack of reasonable suspicion, the illegal search implicit in his questioning, the fabricated charge of obstruction, and most damningly, the outright lie he'd broadcasted over the radio. That lie was a gift, a reckless, career-ending gift. He had tied his illegal stop to a specific, verifiable felony case, a case I knew he had no evidence to connect me to. The station was exactly as I knew it would be, only this time I was on the wrong side of the booking desk. The smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner hit me as Miller paraded me through the squad room. A few heads turned. I saw a detective I'd worked with on a difficult armed robbery case last year. He looked at me, a flash of recognition in his eyes, followed by a quick, uncomfortable glance away. He didn't want any part of this. No one did. I was Miller's prize, and they were letting him have his moment. The booking process was a slow, methodical humiliation. My tie was removed, my shoelaces taken. They took my photo against a cinder block wall, the stark flash illuminating the exhaustion and cold fury in my eyes. They rolled my fingers in ink, staining the hands I used to sign indictments. Through it all, I said nothing. I gave my name, my date of birth, and my address, and that was it. When the booking sergeant asked for my occupation, Miller, who was hovering over his shoulder, chimed in, "Put unemployed. He looks unemployed." The sergeant grunted and typed it in without question. They put me in a holding cell with concrete walls and a metal bench. The air was thick with the ghosts of desperation and regret. I sat down, the cold seeping through my slacks, and finally let my professional mask drop for a moment. I thought of Sarah, probably wondering why I wasn't home yet. I thought of Lily, waiting for her dad and her dinosaur nuggets. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, so potent it made my hands tremble. But I forced it down, converting it into fuel. This wasn't a street fight. This was a courtroom battle, and it had already begun. An hour later, which felt like a year, Davis, the rookie, came to get me. He wouldn't make eye contact. He led me to a small, windowless interrogation room. Miller was there, sitting at the metal table, leaning back in his chair, like he was the king of this little gray box. He gestured for me to sit. "All right, Marcus," he began, dropping the officer-suspect pretense for a more intimate, more menacing tone. "Here's the deal. We know you were involved in that B&E, your fancy car, your fancy clothes. It's the perfect cover. Nobody would suspect you." He slid a piece of paper and a pen across the table. "You sign a full confession right now. I'll talk to the DA. Maybe we can get you a good deal. Leniency. Otherwise, we're gonna throw the book at you. Obstruction, resisting, felony burglary. You'll be an old man before you see the outside of a cell." I looked at the blank paper. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at him. I had given him every opportunity to de-escalate, to walk away, to do the right thing. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to try and ruin my life over a perceived slight, over the color of my skin in the wrong car and the wrong neighborhood. I leaned forward, my cuffed hands resting on the table. For the first time since this ordeal began, I spoke in the voice I used in the courtroom, the voice that commands attention, that cuts through lies. "I'm going to say this once, Officer Miller," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am invoking my right to remain silent. I will not be answering any of your questions, and I want my phone call. I will not be signing your fantasy confession." He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Tough guy, huh? Think your lawyer is gonna save you? We've got you dead to rights." "I don't need a lawyer to save me," I said calmly, looking him directly in the eyes. I watched the condescending smirk on his face, savoring the moment before I wiped it off permanently. "And I won't be calling one. I'll be calling my boss." He scoffed. "Yeah. Who's your boss? Your pimp? Your dealer?" I let the silence hang in the air for a beat. Then I delivered the final lines of the life he used to know. "My boss is District Attorney Frank Henderson," I said, enunciating each word with precision. "My name is Assistant District Attorney Marcus Thorne. I'm the lead prosecutor for the County Homicide Division, and you, Officer Miller, just arrested me for loading groceries into my car, and then fabricated a felony charge over a recorded line to cover it up. So I suggest you go get your union rep. You're going to need him." The color drained from Miller's face. The tough guy's swagger evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed panic that was almost comical. He looked at Davis, who was standing by the door, looking like he was about to be physically sick. The air in the tiny room crackled with the sound of a career imploding. Miller opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time all day, he was speechless. He had built his entire case, his entire justification for this illegal arrest, on the assumption that I was just another nameless, powerless black man he could push around. The revelation that I was an ADA, a senior figure in the very legal system he was meant to serve, shattered his reality. I didn't give him time to recover. "My badge and my county-issued ID are in my wallet, which you illegally seized and failed to properly examine," I continued, my voice cold as ice. "My work phone, which has the district attorney's number on speed dial, is in the property bag. You have exactly 5 minutes to get it for me before I start adding kidnapping to the list of charges I'll be recommending." Davis practically scrambled out of the room. Miller just sat there, deflated, the embodiment of a bully who had just had his teeth kicked in. He couldn't look at me. He stared at the metal table as if searching for a trap door to escape through. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity that I observed with a detached sense of vindication. My boss, D.A. Henderson, arrived in a storm of fury, his face a thundercloud. He didn't even speak to Miller. He just pointed a trembling finger at him, and then at the chief of police who had scurried down from his office. The handcuffs were removed from my wrists with profuse apologies. My property was returned. I was given a private office to make calls, and a detective I actually respected took my official statement. I detailed every look, every word, every action, from the moment Miller's cruiser boxed me in until he tried to coerce a confession. Every detail was a nail in his coffin. The fallout was swift and brutal. The radio dispatch recordings were pulled. The B&E report from Elm Street was examined, confirming my vehicle didn't match the description in any way. Miller and Davis were immediately placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. But I wasn't going to let this get buried in paperwork and union grievances. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who didn't have assistant district attorney as their get-out-of-jail-free card. I filed a civil rights lawsuit against Officer Miller and the city. It wasn't about the money, not at first. It was about forcing accountability. My legal team, made up of the sharpest civil rights attorneys in the state, pro bono, of course, deposed everyone. We got the cruiser's dash cam footage, which, despite having no audio, clearly showed Miller's escalating aggression and my calm compliance. We subpoenaed his service record, which revealed a troubling pattern of complaints for excessive force and racial profiling, all of them dismissed or swept under the rug. He was a time bomb, and the department had let him tick. The city, seeing the mountain of evidence against them, tried to settle quickly and quietly. They offered me a generous sum to make it all go away. I refused. I wanted this to see the inside of a courtroom. I wanted a jury to hear what happened in that parking lot. I wanted Officer Miller to sit at a defendant's table and face the consequences of his actions in the light of day. When the trial finally happened, it was a media spectacle. I sat on the witness stand not as a prosecutor questioning a witness, but as the victim recounting my story. I wasn't just Marcus Thorne, ADA. I was Marcus Thorne, a husband and a father who was targeted and humiliated for no reason other than the color of my skin. My testimony was powerful, but the most damning evidence came from Miller's own partner. Officer Davis, granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, broke down on the stand. He admitted Miller had seen my car and said, "Let's go have some fun with this guy." He confirmed there was never any legitimate reason to stop me, that Miller had fabricated the connection to the B&E, and that he had lied on the radio to justify the arrest. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. When they came back, The foreman read the verdict, finding the city liable for violating my civil rights through a pattern of deliberate indifference to Miller's misconduct. They awarded me $4.2 million in damages. Miller was fired from the force and faced a federal investigation that would ultimately lead to his indictment for perjury and deprivation of rights. The money was never the point, but it was a symbol. It was a loud, clear message that you cannot treat people this way and get away with it. After the verdict, standing on the courthouse steps surrounded by reporters, I thought about that perfect Saturday afternoon. It was gone, shattered like that bottle of Cabernet in the parking lot. But something new had been built in its place. I used a significant portion of the settlement to establish a foundation dedicated to providing legal aid for victims of police misconduct. My personal violation had become a public cause. I still go to the grocery store every Saturday. I still buy dinosaur nuggets for Lily. But now, when I see a police cruiser, I don't just see the law. I see the immense responsibility that comes with it and the devastating price of its abuse. And I know, with more certainty than ever, that my work is far from over.